relationship thing is key with any type of process or continuous improvement. If you go in without asking questions and you're just giving direction or throwing out ideas saying, let's do this, you kind of turn yourself into a bull in a china shop, and people just shut down.
Welcome, everybody, to A Quality Podcast, Season 3. We are joined with Kyle Kumpf, who joined us last season, I think. It's been a while, from the banking industry. And we'll put all of your information down below, Kyle. But for our new listeners, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me. Glad to be back on the show. Enjoy engaging with you and Jake on LinkedIn. I have a bit of at least to me, it's a unique background. Went to school for engineering. Never in my wildest dreams thought that I would be working in the financial services industry. But here I am, living the dream. When I talk to my colleagues and ask them how they got into banking, they're like, well, kind of like you, I accidentally got into it. There's an opportunity that came up, I joined and then never left. And here they are 25 years later. So we'll see if that's me again in another 20 years. I bring that engineering type process mindset to the financial services industry.
Awesome. Good. So we talked about that the last time you were on, and I feel like maybe we had some unfinished conversation, which is why I wanted to have you back on. And there's a lot of folks that reach out to us that we talk to that are not in manufacturing or some type of supply chain for manufacturing that are struggling with lean implementation. Part of that is, a knowledge gap. Part of that is there's a lot of stuff out on the internet. Not all of it is good and helpful or accurate. And so someone like you who, you're engaged in the world of finance and applying lean principles there, I think can offer a lot of value, to these folks. So we wanted to talk today, about processes in banking, and your experience, applying the tools of lean to those processes. So where do you want to start today, Kyle?
We could just start with the basics. Everyone knows about banks is you have your checking account there for your deposits, and then they give out loans. Those are the two basic banking products. So maybe we start with like a loan process.
Maybe I clarify as an idiot in the banking world. Can I just ask a difficult question? What is an origination?
It's a fancy word for underwriting and delivering a loan.
Gotcha. It's all the paperwork that goes into processing a loan. I just didn't want to get my terms wrong while I got Kyle in the room. I'm sorry. So what do you say to all the people that start their conversation with, but we're not a factory, that doesn't apply to us?
So when I first came into the banking world, that I heard that comment quite a bit. When they heard my background as an engineer, they're like, oh, great. I could just see it in their faces. They didn't see it or say it. I could see that they were thinking it. And I said, you know what? You're right. We aren't assembling cell phones here or even cars, but you are assembling loans. And there's a process to that. One of the first things I did was I was challenged with, okay, prove it. And the first place I did that was in that loan area. And I was given, I think, 2 weeks, and we were there when I joined. They were already in the middle of an improvement initiative to decrease the turnaround time from the time a loan request came in to the time there was a decision on it. And I'll just use some basic numbers here. So say it was taking 20 days to get a decision, and this isn't like car loans, this is like commercial complex loans. And say they wanted to cut down to 10 days. They'd have to get there. So that was the target, that was the challenge. And so they had come up with these ideas of improvements that they could do to the process, and how they could get that turnaround time decreased. And I remember I was sitting at this report out meeting with these different leads were presenting these ideas, and They were good ideas. Maybe they work, maybe they don't. But then eventually that later on, they finally asked me, like, hey, what do you think of all this? You're new here. You haven't been in banking. You sat there all day listening to these ideas and the root causes, or what we think of the root causes and how they're going to help. And what do you think? And I go, honestly, I have no idea if this is going to work. Not because I don't understand banking fully yet, but and sitting through all this today, I don't understand what the process is. So I can't, in my mind, pinpoint where each of these countermeasures are going to actually help the process. And they're like, oh, well, it's very clear to us. Well, yeah, you guys have lived this for years. And I go, so would you be open or would you be against me just helping you discover the process? And they're like, well, no, we can wait a couple of weeks here. We'll delay stuff a couple of weeks. We hired you to come in and help us with this kind of stuff. So go do your thing. And so I did that. I went and started sitting with the different members in the back office who were doing all this processing work. And I didn't go in there, with a stopwatch and start timing them and say, okay, well, we can reduce, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, an hour there. I simply observed. I sat with underwriters. I sat with managers. I sat with credit officers. I even sat and met with the lenders to get this idea of like the sales side of what are you doing to input this request to get the back office to be processed and originated. And just took a lot of notes and then started mapping stuff out. I would draw it out on a piece of paper as I was sitting with people. And I would share the map that I come up with. And they're like, yeah, that looks right. Then I go on to the next section of people and do the same thing with them. And next thing you know, we had this end-to-end from the submission point of a loan request all the way to approval and everything in between. And then I went back through, and that's when we started doing some timing. And I would actually follow real loans, kind of follow them through the whole process, the whole value stream. And I would time, get some estimates on how much time someone was actually working on that loan, whether doing some kind of financial spreads, calculating debt service coverage ratio and all these fancy terms that they try and figure out if this person or this borrower is a worthy person to get this loan. And then I would also measure how long a deal sat without being touched. So as I was walking through following this, I would see these small stacks of papers here and there. And I'd ask, well, what's this? So those are deal packages, that's what they call them. And they're kind of, as they were going through the process, they'd add more information to the deal package or the file. And like, well, why are they sitting here? Well, they're waiting for the next person to pick them up and review them and do their part. And interestingly enough, this didn't happen all the time. But there was one stack that had been sitting there for literally 6 or 7 days. No one had touched it. And so I started digging into it. And, after some conversation and asking why, the first one got down to, well, that's, this credit officer is out of the office this week. He's on PTO. So his deals are sitting there. Okay, well, why can't someone else look at these? Well, that's, I don't know. So we dug into a little bit more and come to find out, there's policy at play here. Only certain people look at certain deals of X dollar value or in certain geographies, and well, that person's not in this week, so those deals just sit. So from a customer perspective, that's 6 or 7 days where nothing's getting done on their deal. They're sitting there waiting. Are we going to get this money or not? They have a business to run. They're probably using this money to build a new building to increase capacity for manufacturing, or maybe it's a line of credit to help them with their cash flow, something like that. And so that's a very good example where policy can actually get in the way, and where a simple policy change could actually decrease that end-to-end time that the customer is experiencing. So anyway, continue going through that process, and I created a picture, with the help of all these people, that brought out, here's the actual time people are spending working on providing some kind of value on getting this loan deal done. Here's the time that loan deals are sitting. And it was a very lopsided number. The time actually spent on the deal was, less than 5% of the real time. The other 95% or so was just sitting there. So on this average, on this 20 days it was taking, there was maybe only a few hours that the deal was actually being worked on. And the first time I presented that, even my boss was like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I didn't make this stuff up. I literally, with input of people, this is what we come up with. This is what's happening out there. came back with that to the overall group, and they're like, okay, now what do we do?
Right.
But now they saw that, hey, we have a process here, and I'm like, oh, this is how these deals move through. This is how we get the information in. We crunch some numbers, we add stuff to this to get to this point where, oh, does this make sense for us to lend this money out to this individual borrower or borrowers or company? So again, not a car, but you're trying to assemble these different pieces of information so that you can make a decision as a bank. Do we lend this money? And here's the process for doing it, and here's where time is spent doing different things.
So that brings up a lot of questions for me. First, though, this reminds me of Art Burns' book. Title slips my mind right now, but he was talking about
the lean turnaround, maybe.
Yeah, the lean turnaround. He was talking about something similar. I think it was mortgage origination, and how people involved in the process were on different floors of the building, and the folks that were in the industry that he was trying to coach, kind of said, well, you can't really help us. We're not a factory, that sort of thing. And he said, here's the 7 people that touched the loan, right? What if you put them at the same table? Right? I mean, just put them in close physical proximity, right? A lot of that goes away. Like, there's a mail courier that shows up at like 8 a.m. every morning, and that's it. So if at 8:05 you get your paperwork done and you put it in your basket, it's 23 hours and 55 minutes until the next person touches it, that sort of thing. So really interesting explanation of what was going on here. So I think the first question that popped into my mind was, when you started sort of discovering and documenting the process, was there anybody in the company that actually knew what the process was end to end?
I believe that, yes, there was. I think they had trouble articulating it. They stayed at the high level. We underwrite it, we'll make a decision. Okay, or we get the request from the customer, we underwrite it, we make a decision. That was kind of their basic. That's the process, which is a starting point, but that's too high level to really dig in and figure out, well, where can you improve that process? So no one at that point was I able to find. I could articulate it the way that I was able to work with the team to then discover the actual process.
Right. So there is like the business process, which is almost a theory, right? For example, a factory might be receive materials, assemble materials, ship out finished goods, right? That's the high level process that is similar to what you're describing. Right. In real life, it doesn't look anything like that, right? So you have like the business process, and then you have like the standard operating procedure, which is here's the actual steps that are approved. And then for each step in that SOP, you have like standard work instructions that explain how to do that step, right? So the process is like how you convert inputs to outputs to create value. And then the procedure is the approved way to do that. And then the standard work instructions is like how to execute the approved way. Those 3 levels of documentation I found to be really important in sustaining consistency through change, right, with an organization. If you're not messing with the top level, you can change, beneath that top level with less effort. And if you're only changing the standard work instructions, you can change that fairly frequently without, really messing people up, right? So kind of the higher up you go, the more dramatic the change is, right? The more change management you need to have in place. So as you're doing this, I suspected, right, that you would discover the knowledge of the actual standard operating procedure, that middle level, there's probably nobody, or maybe 1 or 2 people that actually knows what that is in the whole org. And then the people actually doing the work, did any of them understand like end to end, or was it mostly I'm just in my own bubble?
Yeah, it was pretty siloed. In this particular instance, everyone was on the same floor. Didn't have the mortgage issue that Art brought up, but similarly, we had a mortgage operation too that I worked with in some work, and they did have people on different floors in the same building, and I found that kind of, hey, what if?
Oh, right.
They're at least in the same floor. But yeah, no one could go through articulate. And when I showed them the map, it was pretty eye-opening to people, because then they started saying, oh, well, here's how, when I'm doing this piece of financial analysis, here's where it goes next. And then they got to do X, Y, and Z. And then if I don't do something correct, well, then that screws them up. And then there's this feedback loop here that then delays everyone else from doing their job, or being able to do their job. So just having that visibility into that SOP level was quite powerful.
Yeah, I'll tell you, running distribution centers of my career in a leadership role, that's like the first 5 days on site. That is the deliverable. I just want to understand exactly what they do as a process from end to end by piece, and get the whole team to have that clarity. Here's it visual. I usually post it someplace everybody and their mother can see it, and everyone knows exactly how they create value. They know how the person before them does and how they affect the person after.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that lands in the banking industry so very well.
Yeah,
it does. And I got spoiled. So my first job out of college, I worked in distribution in a large warehouse. And I kind of got spoiled there because they already worked that way. Everyone knew how their job impacted someone else. So then when I switched gears, it's like, oh, and this every company doesn't operate this way.
Yeah,
this is not well known.
Well, and some of it's just physiological, right? Like if I'm loading up a pallet, I know somebody's going to pick it up with a fork truck. That's why I'm putting it on the pallet, you know? So there's a lot of visual cues, you know, that help out in some industries. The flow mapping, right? The power that we've seen from that in education, right? It's definitely a platform for improvement, because you can just look at it and say, that's the problem, right? That's a problem right there, especially once you put like the timestamps on. But for education is phenomenal. We actually had an instance where we mapped out this process. And Jake, what was it, like
47 steps. I'll never forget it.
Yeah. And
we printed compared to what I've done.
No, I know. So we printed it out on 11 by 17 sheets of paper and taped them end to end, right, in the office area for folks to see, right? It was like a traffic office. And we moved on, right, from that site. And the next leadership group they went around and took it down, right? A couple weeks later, the supervisor that worked in that office dug it out of the trash and put it back up, because he was like, this is the most powerful thing that we have. Every new person that I hire, that's the first thing we look at. And anytime we have a problem, we just take a thumbtack and we go stick it in the step on that map where it happened. And in a month or two, you have this heat map, and you can quickly see, hey, it's this, it's right here, type of thing. Mm-hmm. So outstanding. So banking, right? Non-factory lean implementation. First thing you did was, document the flow of the process, right? And it was educational for the whole team. Tell me about improvement after that. Specifically, you mentioned they already had a bunch of projects, right? Improvement stuff, initiatives. Mm-hmm. What happened there?
Well, so basically now that we had a process down and we had some data with it, some time study data, some volume estimates, things like that. Now we could start going back to this list of, whatever it was, 10 countermeasures that they come up with already. How do we quantify how much impact do we think they're going to have on reducing this turnaround time? Because then we can do our plan versus actual and see if we implement this, did it actually work, and go through that whole PDCA cycle, which is a whole new concept as well. When I started talking about that, whole scientific method, which is also why I was a big advocate of let's not do all this stuff at once, because then you don't know what's working what's not. You might implement something that's having no impact, and the impact's coming for something else, and you could be wasting your time on this countermeasure. So we did a little bit of that. So we got some estimates. Okay, countermeasure A will take out this much time, countermeasure B this much time, prioritize them. They still put in multiples, but we didn't put in all 10 at once. And then you let them write out a little bit. And okay, are we seeing any improvement here? But what we were able to do was tweak those countermeasures a little bit to get them down deeper to that action level where someone's actually doing the work, because we wanted them to be able to tell us, hey, by making this change, this is actually making your job easier, better. Do you feel the improvement? We didn't want just some number on the calculation saying, yeah, we're going down. Well, if no one feels it though, it doesn't really matter. They're not going to then adopt and want to embrace more and more change.
Okay,
so that was one thing that we did.
Time out right there. Time out. Because that is a freaking awesome point. And I know Jake wants to jump all over that. So yeah, right. You can have an operation and you can have improvements and you can improve the efficiency of the operation if after that the people doing the work feel like they're working harder, feel like it's worse, feel like whatever. That's a loss, not a win, right? Jake?
Yeah, I think you covered what I was going after very, very well. Literally in like the standard set of questions. What can I do to make this feel better for you? Mm-hmm. I'm going to do the math. I'm going to have exactly what the countermeasure is, but I want it to feel better. And if it does not, it's not a good solution. Right? I can add spikes to your chair to prevent you from sitting down so much at work, but are you going to get more efficient? No.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so there's also as a leader, if you put the time into investing in relationships with your people, you can do a lot more, right? That's one of the problems with physically large organizations, right? So when I was the GM of a 350 person site, for example, I can't have relationships with all those people. That means I have to have relationships with ops managers who have relationships with supervisors who have relationships with those folks, right? And there has to be a ratio. I worked with one third-party logistics company that had a corporate guideline of like ratio of people doing the work to leader. And we wouldn't accept new business if the customer wasn't willing to pay for that, right? Because we knew what it took. And that creates a whole separate set of challenges because you have to hire the right people in those layers, right? If you have those relationships, then you can have honest, safe conversations where people will tell you things like, you know, John, the real issue is I'm bored. I had someone tell me this the other day. They're like, hey, can we do this? Can we do this job differently? And I'm like, well, of course we can do it differently. You know that. But like, why would we? He's like, man, I get bored. I want to break things up. I'm like, oh, I feel you, man. It's a factory. Like we're doing the same thing over and over and over again. But if you really think about it, can you think of a job where you're not doing the same thing over and over and over again? He's like, no, not really. I'm like, so you tell me what you come up with and we'll give it a shot. I get it. In the meantime, I mean, it is kind of a factory. Right? And so it provides opportunity. Like you can throw people a bone, like we're going to make this operation more efficient, but my goal is not operational efficiency. That's actually the outcome. But when I'm doing lean, my goal is not operational efficiency. I think I could say it's operational excellence. I think that's fair. Right? Mm-hmm. The efficiency is the outcome of taking care of people, taking care of the customer, right? Being damn good at what you do, type of thing.
So let me ask a drill down question there, Kyle. So in your process, you talked about one thing you did was looked at their established countermeasures. You then did tweaking it so it actually applied to the people doing that actual work. Are you surprised at like the lack of exactly how to do that widely available in the lean community? There's a whole lot of theory like talking about it, but there's not a whole lot of like how do I actually do what you just described there? The A to B has a huge hole in it.
Well, and I think there's a, kind of a disconnect there. So anyone who's read anything on lean, especially Toyota-based lean, they don't sit at desks. They're constantly out on the floor seeing stuff happen as it happens. And so I think when you go through and do some high level analysis, we have a problem. There's this number that tells us we aren't where we want to be. We think we can do these things, but without actually going and seeing how these countermeasures, how the work's actually done, and connecting that to the countermeasure back up to this problem, it's hard to do. And I think traditionally, especially in office environments, you're not taught to go walk the floor, taught to observe. You look at reports and spreadsheets and charts and make decisions off of that. So that's, I think, is still very pervasive in the service industry. I can definitely say it's gotten better, even where I work. There's a lot more. Well, now we're all mostly virtual, but before that, there's still a lot more walking around. You start to see groups meeting on regular huddles just to kind of connect to different departments. I had a daily stand up with it wasn't daily, it was 3 days a week. I had a daily stand up with my team when I was managing it in a department. And that helped me then go to other departments, say, hey guys, here we're doing these other huddles. Here's this issue we're experiencing. And we think it might have something, it might also impact you, or it might be coming from your area. Not that we're criticizing you or pointing a finger at you, but we want to fix this. So that kind of started to open up those lines of communication. So then, back to when we put in countermeasures, we actually had an understanding of the work being done, so we could create better countermeasures to then get to better results when we implemented those countermeasures.
I love it. I'll tell you what made me fall in love with John originally, the beginnings of our relationship. And I tell the story 1,000 times. Here's the short version. He wrote a book called How to Win as a Supervisor Right Now. And I was a supervisor at the time, and we were connected. And he's like, who wants to read it? I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually just how to do all the stuff they just talk about in theory. It's specifically how to do it. And that's what prompted my love. So shout out to John.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jake. Yeah, the impetus for that book, I sucked as a supervisor at first. I hired people that struggled with the same things I did. And I was like, there has to be a book about this, right? And I couldn't find anything. I could find bits and pieces here and there. And I didn't put like a bibliography in my book because it's not that kind of book, But if I did put one in there, it would be 20 pages long because, it's a sentence here and a paragraph there and that sort of thing. So I wrote the book because it didn't exist. And like, there's a section on like connecting with your team, how to do it, memorize your team members' names. And here's how to do that based on, psychology research. Right? Here's something you can do specifically. And that's what the book is, like actually do these steps to get these outcomes to, inform this over here. And there is kind of a dearth of that. There's a lot of theory out there. And I think quite a few of us in this space have learned from a combination of like having a teacher and walking through the processes with them and messing up. Like those are our two teachers, right? Trying stuff on our own. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, I think that relationship thing is key with any type of process or continuous improvement. If you go in without asking questions and you're just giving direction or throwing out ideas saying, let's do this, you kind of turn yourself into a bull in a china shop, and people just shut down. When I intentionally, I wasn't always this way when I first started my career. I was more of went to school as an engineer. I thought I could find the best way to do something that was the best way. And I learned quickly that's not the best way to go about it if you wanted to build.
John calls that on the engineering spectrum.
Yeah. So that's why I like to say I'm a recovering yeah.
I can say that
engineer.
because like I am the poster child for that, Kyle. So I feel you 100%, right? And even once you develop that skill of getting along with others and building the team, there's this little part of you inside your brain going, it's not right.
Yep. But the idea is to fight past that so you can get the team to realize that it's not right, and then they come up with the solution versus you constantly. Now, there are times where you as a manager, like if it's a mission critical thing, guys, just go do this, take care of this. There's a fire. Yes, go put it out. Don't wait for me to tell you to go grab the fire extinguisher and put it out.
Well, hold on. What's
how would you like to put that out?
That?
How would you like to put that out?
Yeah, but I remember, probably 6 months in to being in banking, I asked my manager, I'm like, so we're in a one-on-one. I'm like, so what are you hearing? Like, what do people think of me? How am I doing? That type of stuff. Because I want to get some feedback. And he goes, I've heard, he summarized it very eloquently. He said, they don't always like what you have to say, but they don't mind how you say it. Like, they're realizing that what you're telling us it's true. It's, based off observable facts. And sometimes the truth hurts. But until we realize what that truth is, it's hard to move forward and make actual changes that are meaningful that people feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there was a theme, I think, to my business and this podcast and everything else, it would be like the psychology component of lean, right? Because when I've seen it not work, that's what's missing, right? But so I've got a couple of questions for you. The first is, did we accidentally do like the same hair today? Because I feel like we're really similar. Like,
you're very salt and peppery, the two of you.
Yes.
Hey, you're getting there, Jake. Give it 10 years, you'll be a dead ringer.
My grandfather has brown hair, so no grays coming into this guy.
I like my grays. I'm gonna age like George Clooney. That's my goal. Either George Clooney or Brad Pitt. That's my goal.
Okay, you're gonna get progressively worse.
Swinging
movies,
for
I
that.
can accept
that. This guy, he told me that
I have to get movies first.
Yeah,
he told me that he like walked out in the middle of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm like, first of all, you have to watch it just for the cars. Although they did royally screw up right in the beginning of the movie when they're showing the parking lot, there is a Super Beetle. But the Super Beetle didn't come out until 1974, which is after the Manson murders. So they really fucked that one up, and I don't forgive them. But
and you wonder why I walked out of that movie.
That Gia that he was driving, the 4-speed on the floor with the top down.
Oh my God.
Okay, I've literally only ever walked out of one movie before, and that was Legally Blonde 2.
I'm more ashamed you bought tickets to Legally Blonde 2. I'm judging you for that.
The things that we do for women.
Exactly. Yes.
I already know the story. So my second question is that a miniature golf bag behind you?
It is.
Because I feel like that's super cool.
Yes, this is when I left my former departments. They got me a going away gift, and it was
fully functional
walking golf bag. And these are little pins. It's a leather bag. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So
you want to know something else intimidating about the inventory you've got there? You shared a post recently of all of like the industry leading books you're going to read this year in like a pile, like this is what's on the to-do list, and then you read mine first. So
actually, Jake, I didn't read yours first. I had read one or two books before yours, but yours got thrown into the list and it bumped up. So
yeah, I wonder how progressively worse you think of me as you make your way through.
Do the rest of the stack.
Well, I had very low expectations for your book going in, so
I like that. So it's a pleasant surprise, right?
That way I couldn't be disappointed. When I got to the chapter about the aliens, I'm like, you know what? This makes sense.
I know the guy that wrote this. This fits very suspiciously well, right? Yeah.
Well, at least we know that Jake actually wrote the book. No ghostwriter here.
Yeah, no one else is going to have giraffe people and go, I'm signing off on this.
Right.
No.
Oh, believe me, I had a very serious conversation with Jake about that chapter. And at the end of the day, we were like, you know what? It works. Let's go with it.
My funnest part is if you're on the engineering spectrum, as John calls it, and you're past the 50% mark, you hate that part so much you just want to slam the whole book and throw it in his face. But if you can abstract, it actually is a valid point that needs to be taught.
That's the flip side, is like the creatives and the artistic types that have given feedback on the book, that's their favorite chapter. They're like, oh my gosh, I got that. Like that.
But you know what?
That I understood.
You will never hear that in another book. Any other book I read, they've never gone to that level. So you really separated yourself out there, Jake. I don't know, you've gone to another galaxy far, far away.
Shout out to all the lean people who don't write about aliens. Boom.
Oh, those lemon harvests. Let me tell you what.
Yep.
Okay, so Kyle, to get us back on topic a little bit, you're in banking, which is a service industry, and one of the reasons we wanted to have this show is there's a lot of people who are tasked with continuous improvement and lean in service industries, and sometimes I've had conversations with them, and they're a little discouraged, or frustrated. Can be a lot of headwinds, and talking through. You're documenting the process, educating the team, through that, implementing some projects. Why don't you tell us about some of your wins and what that was like for the team as well as for you in your role?
Yeah. So, going back to the example we've been talking about, we talked about needing some standards. So yeah, we have the SOP level process, and then one of the issues that we had uncovered was you can't submit an incomplete loan request and expect an answer to be given. You can't submit a loan application without financials. Like, we got to know this company's financials. Can they even afford to cover this debt? And so the example I used was like, okay, we know there's a potential deal here. Wrote some stuff down this paper, crumple it up, threw it over the fence to the people that are going to underwrite this, and wish for the best. No, we got to get away from that, because thinking of the inputs to outputs to deliver value. If you give me crappy inputs or no inputs at all, I can't produce anything for you. So we did create some structure and some standards around that front door to get a loan deal into that origination group, and we created a checklist of when these things come in here, this is the bare minimum of things that we need. Otherwise, it's going to get kicked back. So kind of putting in that I'm not going to accept defects. I will not pass on defects mentality, which that sounds easy, but then that took a few meetings of going through, okay, here's the entire universe of stuff we could possibly want. What do we need? What information do we need at each step in the process? So that way we can keep stuff moving, but we don't want to bog it down in the beginning so that you can't even get a deal started, because what you don't want to do is put a lot of time and effort into a deal that you're never going to do anyway and waste that time on it. So we need to figure out a way to also get to a quick no as well, because that can be valuable, so that we can move on to the next deal or next customer, or help that customer find some better solution for what they need for their business. So in doing that, we started to get better information up front that we needed to start the process of underwriting this loan. And that took off a little bit of time, because now you're not spending time going back and forth and having this vicious circle of, well, I need this, no, I need that, and I got to schedule a meeting, and so on and so forth. So that was a win for the people receiving the better quality information. We had some change management with the people who know how to provide this information. And we had to just clearly articulate, here's why you as a lender, and this lender also they'd have an assistant most of the time. Here's why we need this information. So if you're able to get this from your customers, and then you submit that in with this loan request, here's what that does for you. It allows us to get to that quicker yes or quicker no. So this customer's not sitting, out their business or on their farm or something and wondering, well, where's this deal at? So that was one early win. Very simple. That's not a hard. You didn't have to go buy technology to do that. That was being, creativity over capital. We identified some So obviously I mentioned before that there's really only a few hours of actual work within this 20 days. So it wasn't about, let's not focus on how do we make the actual work faster. Because if you take it from 4 hours to 3.5 hours, not really that big of a deal. If you take out 5 days of waiting time where nothing's happening at all, that shrinks the overall end-to-end process, and the customer feels that.
Right.
So let's focus on reducing that. What can we do to take that out of the process? And that's where things like looking at our policy in that example I brought up. Let's not be so strict on only this one role can cover this dollar amount, this geography as an example, and let's change the policy, which doesn't happen overnight. Policy changes actually have, they require board approval. Okay, let's figure out what changes we need to make and get those done. And then once those get implemented, then we can again measure, did that take any of that waiting time out? Do we run into the problem where John, you're on vacation and now Jake can't get his loan because you're in Maui drinking out, smoking a cigar on the beach. So again, that didn't require capital to do that kind of a change. Now, can you get into actual technology constraints that are adding lag time into the process? Yes. And we did implement some of those to again reduce some of the time. Again, going through that process of what are the easy things we can do first without investing capital to do it. We got some wins. I don't think we ever actually hit our goal consistently. There's always variations. Sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. But that average turnaround time did come down significantly over time and stay there.
That's fantastic. I'll tell you, in change like cycle time assessment, my number one spot where I absolutely begin is not even with the process at all. I mean, I do want to understand the process, but the first thing is there a business rule I can change to improve this? That is the number one, like just start right in the middle of it. Every warehouse I've ever been into is like, we let customers place orders whenever and fill them whenever we get around to it. Like, nope, you have to deliver an order by 3 to get filled in within 24 hours. Boom, overtime goes away.
Right.
Drivers are consistently late but still want to be loaded. Here's a rule, $150, you're more than 30 minutes late. Or you have to reschedule with a fee, or I'm not going to load you, or whatever rule you create is oftentimes as impactful or more than actually innovating the process. And there are, when it comes to rules, there are no rules. You want to create a new one that makes sense for your business, just do it.
So that reminds me of a cigar joke that we had in Minnesota. Kyle, what is the best way to improve the flavor of your cigar? Smoke it in Florida. So I love that
versus
example.
Duluth, Minnesota.
Yes, exactly. Or pretty much anywhere in Minnesota. But I love you, everybody. My home lodge is in St. Louis Park. Shout out to you guys. I especially like you in the summertime. So I like that you shared that story because I think there are some people who are new. Well, I know for a fact there are some people that are new in a similar role, and they're scared right now. So I appreciate you sharing that, and the encouragement it can bring folks. And I like that you touched on a couple of really important aspects, right, of improvement there. One is the cycle time reduction, right? Huge cornerstone to continuous improvement and operational excellence. And it doesn't happen by, like you said, doesn't happen by working faster, right? It's very rare that that's part of the equation. I was talking to Dr. M, I think, Jake, I know you know who that is.
Kyle does as well.
Yeah, we were just chatting online, and he asked about cycle time improvement and what percent was work actually being done, right? And there's some studies on this, but of course they're all averages and, depending on your industry and stuff. And I said, the worst case, best case scenario, I don't know what you'd call it. I worked in a fabrication shop that had very long machine programs, right? So they're taking tungsten and magnesium and some of these metals that shape kind of like, trying to carve a cheese wheel. They don't hold the tool very well. And hours and hours, right? These programs would run. So there's a lot you can clean up around that, but we also made the program shorter. It's like, wait a minute, why are you cutting it this way? And you go back and you realize somebody started with this program here, and the scrap rate was so high that one of the operators said, well, if I turn the speed down, on this and turn the rotation speed, the z-axis up on the tool, I'll have less scrap rate. And then a couple months later, a different operator tweaked something else. And by the time you get down here, it's a 6-hour program, and you call one industrial engineer in, with a materials engineer, and they're like, this is a 45-minute program, right? Start by resetting to factory specs. This tool is actually designed to do this for you. Let's start there. Right? And then the really cool thing that you mentioned when you were talking through that, one was, don't try to make the work faster. Remove the waste. Right? That's the cornerstone of lean. Right? Focus on eliminating the waste. And it's slipping my mind. You made another really good point in there that I wanted to comment on.
Peppers really show.
Yeah, my salt and pepper goes below the roots of my hair. Take it away, Jake. Let me see if I can remember what I was thinking of.
Well, Kyle, for the audience, just because we asked, we briefly hit on it. Attack this as you see fit, just because I want to know. Did you enjoy this book?
And for the people that are listening by audio, Jake's holding up a copy of Chasing Excellence by Jake Harrell.
I did. I'm actually, Jake, you'll be happy to know that I'm going to do a post about your book about a couple of key takeaways I enjoyed, the key themes that kept coming to me as I was reading the book.
I'll take that. And if you want to attack it, please do so. It'll get recorded and put into the show. Like, you had a misspelling on page 5.
You know what? Honestly, I think your book is probably the first book I read where I did not notice a typo. I don't believe I caught one. Maybe it's because maybe it's because your book was so short. But no, I've any book I've ever read, I've always find a handful of typos, and I get stuck on them. Like, did I really just read that? Did they misspell that? Did they use the wrong tense?
Well, Jake had a very good editor.
Caught that in your book.
Yeah, Jake had a very good editor.
Excellent editor.
And again, that editor only had 100 pages to review, not 300. So that.
And it had crab people. So if there was something messed up, you could be like, "Is he inventing this?" Or
this is just a made up word.
Yeah.
Well, Kyle, I appreciate you sharing, a little bit about some of the improvements and the impact on the team. I thought it was cool where you mentioned that, the feedback you got was they don't always like what you have to say, but they don't mind how you say it. I have been thinking through this thing for about 15 years now, on and off. And I haven't done anything with it, which is, can I create a mathematical model that describes the relationship between personality and outcomes and continuous improvement, right, among people that are tasked with CI? Because I feel like you could probably put together a valid model there, right? And it's a really important takeaway that the way you approach your improvement initiatives is critical. Who is that guy from Canada? Marshall McLuhan, right? The medium is the message, right? The medium is the message. Like, if you're trying to fix a business, the way you go about it is the message to the employees. They don't give a damn about, the improvement to the business if it doesn't improve their lives and their experience, right?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, that's the inspiration for the brand. People think funny lean guy. How the hell are those two things the same thing? I'm like, they're the same thing. I'm operating with a 400 IQ and playing fifth dimensional chess. Like, these are the same thing. What I'm really trying to do is get you to buy into my master plan.
But that's how you do it. You have to be a fun person to work with. If I was terrible to work with, like, why would you want to listen to me?
Sure, yeah. Well, and that's where the if you look at the evolution of like the role, most of the companies that I've worked with, if they have a like CI leader role, the reason that person is in the role is because they're a good teacher, right? Most of these companies have excellent engineers that are great at solving problems and modeling solutions and problems and all of that, but they're not necessarily skilled with talking to other people, right? Communication skills, teaching, leadership. A lot of individual contributors are that way. Like they've got awesome brains and specific skill set. The relationality piece, not so much, right? And so the CI person is often that bridge that sits in the relationality chair to like get these groups to talk to each other, kind of thing. And it's I don't know, it's an important conversation that I have with folks. Why are you doing this? What do you actually like doing? I like solving problems. Great. But you're in a CI role. Like your job is not actually to solve problems. Your job is to coach other people to solve the problems, right? It's actually, it's different, right?
Yeah, so I think the person in that role, people in that role need to understand that, but also the companies hiring those roles need to understand that, because oftentimes they come hire you, John. Hey, John, you're CI leader. Go do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're expecting on you to actually solve the problems for them. And it's like, yeah, I could do that, but that's going to constrain how many problems you can solve, because I can only solve so many problems.
Yeah.
And again, I'm new to your company, so how many can I really solve the right way?
Yeah, well, everybody's looking for that employee to come in wearing a cape, and just go,
yes,
here we go, up and away. Yeah. So let's use like a metaphor right now. You talk to you got kids, Kyle, right? So if you're talking to a kid about like automobiles, the level of the conversation is lower than like if you were talking to me or somebody who actually drives, right?
We're not talking catalytic converters with my 2-year-old.
Yeah, exactly, right? And you expect that, right? Now, imagine if your 2-year-old was in charge of catalytic converters, right? You would feel awkward because your 2-year-old is saying things and giving you direction that's ignorant because they're a 2-year-old, right? Well, CEOs and boards of directors are sometimes like that 2-year-old talking about the catalytic converter. How would you expect anyone to know everything about everything? That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Of course they're ignorant. But if you have a business culture that basically punishes openness and honesty, right, or at least doesn't reward it, then you're removing the psychosocial grease that allows a leader to say, hey, Kyle, why don't you tell me what we need for our continuous improvement program? Why don't you tell me how we should set this up? Because I don't know dick about it, and I'm comfortable saying that, right? So I've seen what you describe over and over, right? And the closer you get to manufacturing, the worse it is, because the leaders that are like, we're making tractors, we're supposed to know everything there is about lean and manufacturing and industrial engineering. We sell internationally or whatever. So I can't admit that I don't know, right? Like it's a weakness. And so you get some mandates sometimes that are not good. They're not smart, right?
Right. Yeah, and that gets back to the whole, you'll see lots of posts around psychological safety. Safety is a big part of manufacturing. Well, if they're talking physical safety, well, it's that psychological piece as well. If you don't incentivize people to speak up or allow them to speak up, you're essentially holding your business back. You're creating a liability there.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Jake.
The number one thing, and like LinkedIn is the number one, like the place where I fight it every single day, is they don't want intellectual dissent or discourse. They do not want it. They do not want to engage in a conversation about how to actually solve something. see the thing you liked yesterday. January 22nd for the people listening, something in Kyle's activity history from the day before. So when I post about it, it's not attacking
Hey, I
you.
like stuff so it gets visibility. I like it so you see it, Jake. I want to make sure you see it.
Yeah, right. Like we should be able to dissent and disagree, and even if we don't find a middle ground, be men about it, right? Shout out to all the women out there being men about it. But you should be able to have discourse, and for someone to comment back and go, "Well, you just disagree with me. I don't like you." Well, that's not how the world works, man. Like business is a series of amoral decision making to do the best thing we possibly know how with the tools and skills and knowledge we currently have. That's ever evolving in all of those directions. So you don't get to just make a bi-emotional statement and go, "This is the way it goes." No, the heck, it isn't.
I'm reading the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team right now.
Oh, good book.
Yeah, it is a great book, but it talks a lot about that. For a team to actually gel and work together, the team itself has to be able to have that dissent. They have to be able to challenge each other. They have to be able to disagree, and really push the other people on the team to come to decisions. If it's just the CEO comes in on the executive team and says, "Here's what we're going to do," and no one else says anything different, that team is going to fall apart very easily.
Yeah.
Why would I even want a friend that doesn't challenge me, that doesn't want me to get better, that doesn't man sharpens man. If John wasn't improving my life, he wouldn't be in it, right? Like the mutual agreement is that we are going to hold each other to be the best fucking men we could possibly be.
That's right. Shave your fucking beard. So
thank you for that.
No, I disagree, Jake. I think we should agree on everything.
Shave the right side of your mustache, John. Zoom in on that, audience.
I did. I shaved it very closely today, and it's the left side. It's just mirrored because of the thing.
Oh, yeah.
Besides, it's growing back.
He has a segment that doesn't grow at all, Kyle. Like he's a radioactive accident.
I
can't grow a beard, so.
It involved a hand-loaded 7mm Winchester short magnum that might have misfired, and that's as far as we'll go with that conversation because YouTube will take it down. But it's growing back, okay, slowly.
Well, this is my first year with a full goat, right? Like it's still scraggly, terrible, but I turn 31 tomorrow, so maybe that year I'll get a full beard that actually makes sense and looks decent.
Well, I mean, calling it full is a stretch, but you're trying, so keep up the good work. Yeah, so talking about psychological safety, giving directives, top down, command and control, that sort of thing. I had something yesterday or the day before at my factory. So most folks know I run a factory on the side, and we were talking about flow.
You say that so nonchalantly, like I run this on the side.
I do, but it's not huge. It's not like a car factory or something. But anyway, I'm talking to two guys, two supervisors, and they're young, right, and dumb. I'm old and dumb. They're young and dumb. And we were talking about flow, and we didn't have the flow that I was looking for. And I told them we need to have a conversation and align because we're going to talk to this one operator that operates this one machine that is, historically the bottleneck. And I want to make sure our messages align. And it was the end of the day, and we were all, kind of tired and hangry. So, we were arguing for 15 or 20 minutes or something. And I said, okay, guys, I can break out VenSim right now and put together a model and show you what I'm talking about. Or, I'm just going to ask you to trust me as the industrial engineer in the group, that like I know what I'm talking about. Just assume that I'm right for the sake of the conversation. Can you do that for me? And they were like, oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. I'm like, okay. So, if we assume this, this, and this, then, here's what we want to have happen. And I was coaching them through, like, it's not a policy, it's dynamic. I don't want this guy to do the same thing over and over again. I want him to learn how to look at these leading indicators to change his methodology, right? And it had to do with setup and change over time. It's like how many times per day type of thing. And like, there's not a number, right? It's all relative. So at the end of the conversation, we had a greater collective understanding. And that was the point where I could have said, okay, we all had our say. I'm the boss. We're doing it this way. Right. But I didn't. I said, this operator has to learn to see things the way we see them. And you know what? We see things a little bit differently already. Right. We're all on a learning curve. Right? And I'm trying to help educate you guys. Because, yeah, I get it. I'm farther ahead than you guys are. I've literally been working as long as, since you've been alive, for one of the guys. He's like, oh, yeah. I've been a supervisor. I've been a salaried member of management, since the year you were born. So I didn't go that direction, which I could have, and it wouldn't have been terrible, honestly, because we did have an open, rambling conversation. I just said, you tell me, what are we going to communicate to this operator? And about two minutes, we had something hashed out. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it was more of what I wanted than if it had been what I wanted, because those two guys are going to have the same message. We're all going to be aligned, and that operator is going to get consistent education and feedback and not be confused. Well, I mean, that was it. I'm done.
Not everybody hit all at once.
There's just a thought that popped in my mind as we were talking through that. We talked about psychological safety, and we mentioned the service industry being a knowledge factory. So literally the value that industry provides is up here in our heads. We need to protect that as much as possible. So I absolutely agree with the whole psychological safety aspect. That needs to be a focus.
Yeah, it's hard to do, depending on people's individual culture, who they are, the natural variation you get among humans. It's not an easy task. It's just not. So kudos to John for just allowing it to be 80% of what you want, and letting the ball move forward.
Right.
Don't let perfection get in the way of progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And for me, learning specific behaviors as a leader. Right? It's a learned skill. It's not magic. It's not like I was born this way, or someone.
You're on the right track, baby.
Thanks. But you just, it's a collection of learned skills, and we don't emphasize enough, and we don't, just as a culture, right, in America. Seriously, you sent 20 people for greenbelt training last year, and you didn't send one person to how to not be a shit supervisor school, right? Where
do you apply to not be a shit supervisor school, John? Where do you apply to that?
I don't know, but it seems like a product we should come out with. That's what my book is: How to Win Right Now as an Operations Supervisor. It's you have to have these skills, and here's how you can do it, and you can do it right now, right? And I have quite a few operations that are buying my book. Every new supervisor they gets a copy and reads through it, because, like I said, unmet market need. But if I'm running this corporation, why is it that I put so much value in? I mean, I'll reimburse tuition for a 4-year degree, but I won't pay for people to learn the basics of leadership psychology and team dynamics and the culture code and all of this stuff, right?
Yeah, one of the best leadership schools I've been to is called Being a Parent.
Oh God, don't pull that card out. John's gonna mention cars the whole day, and y'all both gonna talk about kids for an hour.
Well, I guess the kicker for me with having kids was, not learning how to lead kids, right? It was learning about myself. That was the most valuable part, especially, I've got a daughter, and I can't just tell her, do this. It doesn't work that way. I'll be do this. She's like, Daddy, you know what I love about you? I'm like, no, you have to clean your room. Don't, she knows every trick in the book. She's a psychological wizard. Maybe you are born that way. I don't know. But it's what my kids taught me about myself. and then I get short tempered. My kids are doing something that I don't want them to do, and I get short tempered, and I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that I'm such a self-centered person, with such a short fuse. Yeah, like they're kind of like a mirror.
That's exactly right. I have to realize I have a 6-year-old son. That's why he's doing this dumb stuff. I was 6 once too.
Right.
If I have a team, I have an inexperienced team. Yeah, they might be messing up, but they're inexperienced. It's my job to get them the experience, is to train them up, is to coach them. Not go out there and bark at them for screwing something up.
Just spank them, Kyle.
Yeah.
Well, that works.
Well,
right? That's a model. That works.
Unfortunately, with kids, if you kick them, they don't still love you like a dog. So you got to relearn all of your habits.
If you do that at work, then HR calls you, and that's not a good thing.
Well, we're right at the 1 minute there, so we want to wrap it up. We want to log back in, give a wrap up.
I think we should wrap it up. I mean, we'll be able to put together about an hour's worth. So, Kyle, we really appreciate you joining us today to talk about your experience with lean in banking. I think it'll be a big benefit to our listeners that are sort of in the service industry. So thanks for sharing with us. Always a great time. Can't wait to have you on the next time. How can folks get a hold of you?
LinkedIn is the best way. I'm active on there. If you follow the Lady Gaga of Lean on LinkedIn, you'll find me in the comments.
Well, all right. Kyle Kumpf, ladies and gentlemen, for everybody out there in YouTube land, thank you so much for listening to A Quality Podcast. Goodbye.
I've been saying Kumpf for so long. I'm sorry, audience. I'm so sorry. Is it Kumpf or Kumpf? Or it's Kumpf. Or Mein Kampf? Mein Kampf?
It's Kumpf. No, not Mein Kampf. Kumpf.
I don't know why this is so hard for you, Jake.